So are the prohibited acts under APASA punishable twice?
There are different acts. It's one act.
The prohibited acts, they're
the,
punishable.
the acts defined here are not present in the AMLA. They're not defined in the AMLA. So these carry their own penalties.
Yes, so the paragraph 2 of section 9, we shall consider them unlawful activities. Naka-quotation mark siya, because unlawful activities, that phrase is found in AMLA.
These are separate activities. AMLA has their own. AMLA has money laundering is also, it's a separate offense from the offense defined in the AFASA.
Correct.
You could be a money mule, but that doesn't say that you're money laundering. But eventually, it might lead to that. So these are two separate crimes.
Yes. So that's the meaning and import of the second paragraph of section 9. The prohibited acts under sections 4 and 5 of this act shall be considered as unlawful activities under the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001. So, so if they are not punished twice, they could potentially be punished twice, Mr. President. Same act.
Those are different crimes as defined.
Yes.
Again, you can be guilty of a crime like this, but not necessarily guilty of money laundering.
Yes.
So
Yes, and act.
You have to establish that also under the investigation.
So the AFASA, as we are establishing now in this interpellation, is really heavily interrelated or entangled with the anti-money laundering law, Mr. President.
Is that we are still in the period of interpellations and debate. With the consent of the body, I move to resume the period of interpellation and recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, our Deputy Majority Leader, Senator Mark Villar, and to continue with this interpellation, our Minority Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III.
We'd like to recognize the sponsor, our Deputy Majority Floor Leader, Senator Mark Villar, and to interpellate our Minority Floor Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel III. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is a resumption. It's a resumption of our interpellation, Mr. President. So, with the permission of our sponsor.
Yes, please continue.
Mr. President, in order to appreciate the bill, this representation reread the sponsorship speech of our sponsor. And, the title of our measure is Anti-Financial Account Scamming Act, Mr. President. So under the declaration of policy, it seeks to protect all persons from falling prey to the various cybercrime schemes by regulating the use of financial accounts and preventing their use in fraudulent activities. So that is also reflected in the privilege speech, Mr. President. And I think the speech enumerates the scams that we hope to be addressed, remedied, and we hope that the occurrence will be drastically reduced in number, Mr. President. Meron po dito online selling scams, investment scams, ATM fraud / phishing, call scams or phishing, employment scams, loan scams, package scams, profile hijacking, accommodation scams, and love scams. Yan po ang nasa speech. Senator Tulfo heard me right. Love scam, L-O-V-E. Mr. President, what is a love scam and how will it be prevented by our measure?
Yes, this is when, and I hope none of us have fallen prey to this very insidious scam, where a person is tricked into believing they're in a romantic relationship with someone they met online, when in fact, their other half is a cybercriminal using a fake identity to gain their victim's trust, to ask or possibly even blackmail them for money.
So at the end, it's not because of the fact that their hearts have been won over. It's because of the fact that they were taken advantage of financially.
More like their hearts were broken.
Yes, but
yes, yeah, they're using the emotions of the person and using the medium of online to hide their true identity and true intentions in order to gain their information and trust.
Okay, so ito pong mga in-enumerate natin na scams sa ating privilege speech po are all online scams. Number 1, tama po yun?
Yes, at some point, yes, somehow using some technology in order to execute their crimes. Because at some point, when you're not viewing with the person, you'll have to, there might be a transfer of funds, transfer information, that will most likely, that will require some online usage in order to execute.
Okay. So yun po yung acts na penalized under our measure na somehow they are in the nature of a scam, and there is a portion of the scam which is online, Mr. President. It need not be all online, no? All the elements of the scam.
No, it need not be online. In fact, that's why we clearly define these scams in the bill so that they can already be considered as a predicate offense. So I think it's important, and then there's a specific penalty to these crimes.
And all of these scams which we have enumerated must involve financial damage, Mr. President, on the part of the victim. Hindi lang more than broken heart.
But just the creation of a fake account is already considered a crime under the bill. So it's not necessarily, but there is an intent to. That's why it's important to define it so that even the creation of these.
Yes, so it's not necessary. Yeah. So the financial damage aspect is not necessary. So meaning to say, ito po sa scams na enumerated natin is profile hijacking.
Yes.
Yeah po. So no need for financial damage.
No, there's no need. Just the act alone constitutes a crime under the FASA.
Okay. Thank you. How is this done, Mr. President? Can we be given an example?
For which one, Mr. President?
Kunyari, the use of a financial account to hijack a profile.
Okay, one, for instance, when you say hijack profile ID theft scam, it's an infiltration of a particular social media account in which, after gaining access, the unknown perpetrator will send messages to the relatives and friends asking for a favor to send or lend him some money. So they'll basically they hijack the profile, and thinking that it's the relative, the victims will send money or some kind of and most of the victims are actually young, 21 to 30 years old.
Sa tingin ko, Mr. President, matagal na itong nangyayari at marami na yata na bibiktima nito. Wala po ba silang remedy under present law? Matagal na po nangyayari ito dahil I remember may mga friends ako na ang pahabol nila, di ba? Ang papahabol nila is hindi ako yung nag-message sa'yo.
There are remedies, but obviously because of the lack of teeth for the bill and the lack of powers, it's very difficult for the government, for the BSP to act on these crimes. Precisely why we want this bill to be passed as soon as, because the increase in number of these kinds of crimes is very alarming, and if we don't have a law that protects our population from these crimes, it's proven to be difficult historically, and it will continue to be difficult unless we pass these additional measures that will help solve these issues.
So the example given by our sponsor, Mr. President, yung facts doon, yung bare facts given there, is already a crime under present law.
Yes.
Tama po ba yan? But what is now, so victims have been trying to prosecute their suspected perpetrators. Pero what have been the problems that they have been encountering, Mr. President? That's why we need to justify the need for this measure, Mr. President.
Well, because of the absolute confidentiality, and also because AMLA has certain conditions that aren't present that limit also the ability to open these accounts. At least with this bill, it clearly defines the acts that fall under financial scamming, and it clearly defines the power of the BSP, so they can react quickly to these crimes, and they have the power to suspend an account for a limited period of time as they're investigating the acts of the criminals.
Kasi ang example dito, for example, ang example na in real life, Mr. President, ako'y naka-encounter na ng ganyang reklamo na ginamit yung Facebook account niya to send messages that he is stranded somewhere, tapos magpadala ng pera kasi he needs financial assistance kasi stranded siya, nakuha yung wallet niya, whatever.
As simple as
and
SMS.
Even
SMS.
Even and then SMS. Oh. But then, for example, this is a Facebook account. So is this scenario covered in our bill, Mr. President?
Well, by hijacking the profile of a person, that's defined in this bill, in terms of identity.
Yes, humingi siya ng tulong financial, pero let us say, wala pa naman nabibiktima, but still, wala pang kumakagat na nagpapadala, but still, that's already under the terms of the penal offenses or the acts we want to penalize. parang ano na siya, bagsak yata siya sa social engineering scheme.
Yes,
Mr.
it says here
President.
that
Okay, now we are giving the BSP the authority to investigate such a
yes, if there's a institution, if there is a file, if they file institution, the BSP has the power to investigate, and they also have to, and they also require that the financial institutions have they set a guideline for basic protection, for that they will a basic protection system for the basic protection for against financial scamming. So that'll be a requirement. They have to do some form of protection so that at least they will not be liable should there be any cases of financial scamming.
No, but our first example was the use of a Facebook account.
Yes,
So,
yes.
I mean,
That's a social
is that
engineering
really
scheme.
covered? Is that
Yes,
will
it's a-
Facebook now be under BSP to be regulated by BSP?
No. As regards to BSP, as regards to the actual, at some point it will land on some account, and that's one of the issues at hand. Is that once it hits the account, they're unable to trace who owns the account. They cannot investigate any further. So it's a hard stop. So under this law, the BSP can actually investigate it if there's a strong suspicion from a responsible institution that there is a financial crime being committed.
No, in our example, the BSP will only come into the picture if there is already financial damage. Pag wala pa.
If there is a complaint filed, that is a trigger. If there is a complaint filed and the responsible institution finds that there's merit to the complaint, then the BSP can but that's not to say that's just giving powers to the BSP. It's also defined here that there are social engineering schemes that are also considered that are also penalized under the act. So just making misrepresenting yourself or to solicit financial information is already considered criminal act.
In our example, Mr. President, kasi ginagamit ko yung example niyo because alam ko na sa tunay na buhay nangyari na ito. I have a friend or friends who have already complained to me na sending messages nga asking for money. Hindi ko alam kung may na-victimize o hindi. But the mere fact that somebody else got control of your social media account or Facebook page or account, sending out messages to your embarrassment, di ba? Na asking for help, is that already a crime now? And looks like it is a crime already now, and then it is still a crime under this measure. Why the need for this measure, Mr. President? And if the BSP is now the implementer of this measure, how is it going to be applied on that particular scenario, Mr. President?
Yeah, the way we see it is this is complementary with the AMLA. Again, the AMLA was not designed to respond to this kind of financial financial scamming. Punishable offenses under a FASA will now be considered as predicate offenses punishable by AMLA. So I think it's important to establish penalties for these specific instances, these specific laws, because they're not defined right now. We need to define them in order for us to be able to enforce them. And we need to give the BSP additional powers so that when the most common roadblock in the execution of any of these crimes is when the funds enter an account, be it fictitious, be it a money mule. Once they enter the account, it's a hard stop in the investigation. They can no longer find the identity. They can no longer investigate further. These are not the circumstances that are highlighted in the AMLA. Now, these specific circumstances are defined in this bill, and they give the BSP specific powers to address these specific financial scamming occurrences.
Di ba po ang BSP, the BSP under current law has three main functions, Mr. President. Number one is to maintain price stability, diba? Yan yung usapin ng inflation. Number two would be to protect the value of the peso. The number three would be to supervise our banking institutions. More or less, yan po yung tatlo. Ngayon, kung titignan po natin, walang jurisdiction ng BSP sa individual bank accounts. Over banks meron, but ito pong in this measure, are we giving now the BSP the power over individual bank and or financial accounts, Mr. President?
Under a very specific circumstance, they're allowed to suspend an account if they find, given their own rules and regulations, that it is a financial. There may be a strong suspicion for financial fraud. And just to be clear, financial consumer protection and financial stability is covered by the BSP.
That would be, lagyan natin, that would be a fourth responsibility of the BSP.
Yes, yeah, well,
Yeah, dagdag na lang natin doon sa enumeration ko pa. So in this particular case, all of us na mayroong mga bank accounts and or financial accounts would now be under the jurisdiction of the BSP instead of our banks being under the jurisdiction of the BSP. Tayo na mismo, Mr. President.
If there is if a responsible institution finds that there is a strong probability of scamming, the BSP is given certain powers in order to at least stop the scam temporarily. Otherwise, you'd have to file in the court, and the court would decide. It might take a long time. Meanwhile, the crimes are being perpetrated.
Is it the BSP which will order the freezing of the account, or the BSP will issue the guidelines for the freezing of the account?
They don't. They can only suspend. They can only hold temporarily. They don't. They cannot.
Yes. Okay. So hold temporarily. So it's a direct order from the BSP.
Yes. Guidelines. It's a guideline. They set the guidelines for holding.
And who makes the decision to temporarily hold an account, Mr. President?
A financial institution will make that determination upon a complaint, upon a verified complaint by a responsible institution or possible.
So it is the responsible institution, and yan yung term na gamit sa measure natin eh. And who would be the responsible institutions under our measure, Mr. President?
It says here in section 3, responsible institutions refers to banks, non-banks, other financial institutions, payments, and financial service providers that are under the jurisdiction of the BSP, and such other institutions as may be determined by the BSP.
So the BSP, when we say that under the jurisdiction of the BSP, we look at present law. Problema natin yung phrase and such other institutions as may be determined by the BSP. So we're empowering the BSP to empower itself, Mr. President.
Yes, sir. If we are certainly open to any changes that Your Honor may propose.
Yes, pero at least with that manifestation from our sponsor, that's a potential reading of our bill, Mr. President. So ingat-ingat po tayo doon because that's parang dinelegate na po natin. But ano yung mga responsible, kasama po yung, for example, yung mga GCash. GCash na yata kayo ng pagbayad. Ano pa ba ibang?
Yes, it's under BSP.
That's a responsible
Yes.
institution.
Yes.
But GCash is
a financial service provider. They operate under a license from the BSP.
Yeah, GCash is the name. So the corporation operating GCash, yun.
Yes.
Yun yung under, that's the responsible
Yes.
institution.
Yes. GCash, they operate all these. They operate under a license from the BSP. These
Yes, that
GCash.
GCash, yeah, that's I think the brand name, Mr. President. Pero parang something Globe Fintech or something. I think that's the.
We can research the corporate.
So that is the responsible institution. Apo, sila po.
One of the.
Apo. Ano po so the banks that we know of, ano pa ba? Itong apps, and then what are the possible responsible institutions, Mr. President?
Well, again, banks,
insurance companies. Are they responsible institutions?
Pawn shops,
pawn shops,
insurance companies.
No, they fall. Yung mga
I'm
covered.
not sure. I don't think insurance companies are under the
not?
insurance commission, right? If I'm not mistaken.
So I thought yung mga covered sa AMLA, are those responsible institutions?
All virtual asset service providers. Yeah. So again, under the AFASA, our eyes are defined as banks, so they do not include under the insurance commission.
Yes, yung banks po, okay, ano na yan, that's the traditional way we understand the jurisdiction of the BSP. But over the years na nga, because of technology, nag-expand na. So may we get an idea on what are the institutions, entities, and or activities over which the BSP has jurisdiction?
We can provide a list to Your Honor. of all
Is this-
those ones
is this a long-
that fall under the BSP. Whether
Is it a long list or just baka mga
it's quite a long
banks,
list.
for example,
Well,
banks,
banks obviously
payment
providers
apps.
for application, your money applications such as GCash, anything that is supervised by the BSP, pawn shops,
Remittance
savings and loans.
Remittance po.
Remittances
Kasama?
also
Tama?
fall under, yes.
So these are the responsible institutions mentioned in our bill, Mr. President. But the problem, Mr. President, is the responsible institution, kunyari, acting under the guidelines of the BSP, can already temporarily hold a subject financial account acting upon information from another responsible institution, or upon complaint from an aggrieved party, or upon finding under its own FMS.
Yeah, the financial fraud management system. They're under the bill. They are required to maintain a fraud management system that is responsive to the guidelines of the BSP.
Yes, kaya nga pwede siyang mag-act upon a complaint from an aggrieved party regardless of the amount complained of by the aggrieved party.
Yes.
And the aggrieved party can make the argument that the transaction that he or she is complaining against has no clear economic purpose. Mr. President, is that already a ground to temporarily hold an account? Ang worry ko po is yung standard na has no clear economic purpose. What is that, Mr. President?
Yes, I mean that's what it says in the law, that,
Yes,
that it
and-
has no clear economic
Yes.
from an illegal source. That's of course whenever we make transactions, they require us to mention like the source. Sometimes they require source of funds. Now we can define that more clearly, and if your honor has a suggestion,
So-
if you're uncomfortable with the broadness, the perceived broadness of this line, we can of course be more specific.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We need to tighten the language kasi meron pa rin dito that a transaction appears to be unusual. Mahirap po na standard
Yes,
yan,
yun na.
Mr. President. And then, but Mr. President, so nag-worry na nga tayo that too much discretion we are giving to the responsible institution. But does the responsible institution also face a sanction just in case
If
it is abusing this discretion being given to it?
Yes, under the law, they're required to maintain a fraud management system, and if it is not compliant with the BSP standards, then they can be liable. They can be administratively liable, and they might be liable for us to give restitution to the victims.
But if but I think there is a section here that also allows the responsible institutions to avoid any
If they're
sanction,
found, if they found that if the BSP deems that they've sufficiently complied with their fraud management system standards that are set by the BSP, then they're not liable. They're not necessarily liable. They're not liable if they comply with the standards set by the BSP. But they're liable if they don't comply with the standards that are set by the BSP for fraud management.
Yeah, so envision under our measure is that there is this BSP who will now issue guidelines for a fraud management system to be complied with by the responsible institutions, all of which are under the jurisdiction of the BSP, under the law, under existing law. Tama
Yes.
po ba?
Yes.
So kung nangyari na po yun, na compliant sila, how come there was still a fraud perpetrated?
Well, just because you can be compliant, but yet there's still we cannot predict the types of frauds that I mean. It's a very fluid. It's a very fluid these frauds. There's so many different variations that one cannot predict all of them, and we cannot say that it would be. I think it would be unrealistic to think that there's any kind of foolproof system. But I mean, to be fair to these institutions, if they can give us if they just give us a measure of safety that is acceptable to the BSP, I think that is enough. At the same, and if this fraud still comes through, then you know, there's still they have the power to at least catch the person who did it.
Di ba po meron na tayo ngayong parang two-factor authentication? And then our bill mentions yata a multi-factor authentication system. So that would be part of the FMS.
Yes.
That theoretically. So would the FMS would be mandatory, hindi po ba?
Yes, it would be.
Nasa ngayon ba itong mga two-factor identification system, is this optional sa ngayon?
Well, if under the law, it'll be the BSP who sets these standards. So, you know, whether or not it will be optional, that will be for them to. That will be their job to define the fraud management system.
So, Mr. President, we noticed several similar provisions in our AFASA bill with the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Kaya giving us the our earlier impression that this may one of our questions in our first part of our interpellation, that isn't this bill meant to be just an amendment of the AMLA, Mr. President? So can we be educated on how different AFASA is from AMLA, Mr. President? Let me also add that according to Europol, what is Europol? Yes, it's a European entity. Money muling is a type of money laundering, so which adds to our conceptual difficulty, Mr. President, because money mule is also.
That's why it's a complementary. It's complementary to the AMLA. We are defining money mule as also a crime. So there's a big difference between AFASA. I mean, there is a difference in investigation and prosecution under AMLA and AFASA. Prosecution of money laundering under AMLA requires an allegation to establish the commission of an unlawful activity through law enforcement agencies. The law enforcement agency will be the one to refer the money laundering case to the Anti-Money Laundering Council. Thereafter, it will be the AMLC who will evaluate the existence of the unlawful activity based on the referral of the law enforcement agency and subsequently conduct an investigation on money laundering. If there's probable cause, the Anti-Money Laundering Council will file the case before the courts. In AFASA, the aggrieved party will be the one to go to the law enforcement agency, and in the LEA's investigation, the law enforcement agency can ask assistance from the BSP to determine all the necessary facts and information, including information on the financial account, as BSP is exempted in the application of Bank Secrecy Law, Data Privacy Act, and Foreign Currency Deposit Act. Under AFASA, it will capacitate the law enforcement agencies to file appropriate cases before the courts.
But there is a wide overlap between the acts punishable under the Anti-Money Laundering Act as well as the acts punishable under AFASA?
Punishable offenses under AFASA will now be considered as predicate offenses punishable by AMLA. While European laws deem money muling activities and money laundering synonymous, that is not yet the case in our jurisdiction. Presently, scams must first be established as a form of swindling before invoking the application of the law. This is how the new scams like smishing, vishing, phishing, and now quishing are thriving. With the advent of advanced technology, fraudsters can now easily and successfully consummate their nefarious acts, even after an account owner receives and clicks a seemingly harmless link, absent any inducement from the sender. With AFASA, there is no need to establish that these scams are forms of swindling under the AMLA law, since the law clearly defines the manner how money muling and social engineering schemes are committed, making them predicate crimes already.
Where is the term predicate crime mentioned, Mr. President? In AFASA or in AMLA?
AFASA.
In AFASA? Is the concept of predicate crime introduced in AFASA, Mr. President?
I'll look for the section. So here in Section 9, prohibited acts under Section 4 and 5 of this Act shall be considered as unlawful activities under Section 3I of Republic Act number 9160, otherwise known as the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001.
So, yes, so the sponsor was reading page 6, lines 34 to 36. Tama po yan, no? Second paragraph of Section 9.
That's right.
Tama po. So, are the prohibited acts under AFASA punishable twice?
They're different acts. it's one act.
The prohibited acts, they're
the
punishable.
the acts defined here are not present in the AMLA. They're not defined in the AMLA, so these carry their own penalties.
Yes, so the paragraph 2 of section 9, we shall consider them unlawful activities. Naka-quotation mark siya because unlawful activities, that phrase is found in AMLA.
These are separate activities. AMLA has their own. AMLA has money laundering is also a separate offense from the offense defined in the AFASA.
Correct.
You could be a money mule, but that doesn't say that you're money laundering. But eventually, it might lead to that. So these are two separate crimes.
Yes, so that's the meaning and import of the second paragraph of section 9. The prohibited acts under sections 4 and 5 of this act shall be considered as unlawful activities under the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2001. So if they are not punished twice, they could potentially be punished twice, Mr. President. Same act.
Those are different crimes as defined.
Yes.
Again, you can be guilty of a crime like this, but not necessarily guilty of money laundering.
Yes.
So
Yes, an act.
You
Yes.
have to establish that also. Under the investigation, they would have to establish.
So we can commit an act under AFASA, which can now, so that's already punishable under AFASA, and then that same act can be considered the unlawful activity, so that it can now be made part of the crime of money laundering.
Yes, it can trigger investigation by AMLA.
Yes, trigger investigation by AMLA, and also then a prosecution and a potential punishment, Mr. President. So the AFASA, as we are establishing now in this interpellation, is really heavily interrelated or entangled with the anti-money laundering law, Mr. President.
Maybe not entangled. I think it was really in support or to enhance, perhaps, but not entanglement. Would perhaps insinuate some confusion,
conflict about.
Yes.
So complementary, but so what about AMLA? Are we now enhancing, Mr. President? So
well, AFASA is more consumer protection. You know, we talk about consumer protection. Anti-money laundering is a different creature from when you talk about financial scamming. So not that there are cases where they could be financial scamming can lead up to money laundering, but that doesn't mean that they can be mutually exclusive. But there could be connections, and maybe in some cases there are, but we have to clearly define the difference.
what is that new scam that His Honor mentioned, Mr. President? Quishing? Is that the letter? Quishing?
Quishing, that's QR code
the
scam.
QR code scam.
Quishing.
And what is that, Mr. President? QR code scam. How is that perpetrated, Mr. President?
You have a QR code that poses to be a certain, perhaps gives an innocent service or something. They click on the QR code and actually retrieves the information, and they use that for to create perhaps access the money of the victim. So QR code.
Ito po bang mga QR code system? Wala po bang central body governing the issuance of the QR codes, the release of the QR codes? Kanya-kanyang gawa pala. You can just make your own QR code.
You can make your QR code. Even your calling card, you can create your own QR code, and then they just click it. Restaurants use it for their menus.
And then it can force the hardware scanning the QR code to reveal some financial
it can be used. I mean, I'm not a technology expert, but I think people are able to find a way to utilize that QR code to somehow access your information or something that might allow them to access some kind of information that can aid them in the scam.
Ito po ba mga scams na binanggit po natin kanina plus this latest one, the QR code scam? Does it need some act from the victim? Some act, some sharing of confidential information coming from the victim, Mr. President?
Yeah, more often than not, you need to somehow gain either some information or gain access, and they do that by misrepresentation most of the time. And,
so
that allows them, the misrepresentation is what gets them the access to either information or maybe directly to their financial accounts.
Kasi as I think we have established during the first part of our interpellation, when it's a complete hack, di ba? by hacking, nakuha po yung profile hijacking. That is not covered by AFASA.
I think that already falls. When you talk about hacking or in terms of systems, going into systems, that's more under the cybercrime.
Kaya nga, the commonality of the scams we want to be governed by AFASA is the fact that because of the interaction, there must have been some interaction, no, between the criminal perpetrator and the victim. Because of their interaction, the victim shared some information to the criminal perpetrator which allowed him to commit the acts penalized under AFASA. Ganun po ba yun? There must have been a contact between...
Yes, at some point.
Okay. So our bill now, okay, so ang bill natin, because the contact between the victim and the perpetrator, we're assuming now happened through a responsible institution. Ganun po ba yan?
Through a responsible institution?
Through a responsible institution. That is the contact. That the responsible institution is the bridge between the criminal perpetrator as well and the victim.
It can also be the initial contact can be online. I mean, this is when we talk about the actual smishing is via SMS. So the point of contact does not necessarily be the responsible institution. But at some point, once if there's a financial loss that's when at least the AFASA allows the investigation to continue, and it gives them more abilities to conduct an investigation into the scams.
Okay. I get now the scenario, Mr. President. So the criminal and the victim, if it's through smishing, which is text, but smishing is SMS. It's through the telco services. A telco is not a responsible institution. It's not
as defined by.
But because of that communication, the victim somehow revealed to the criminal some information which now allowed the criminal to access or control or take over some financial account of the victim.
Yes, or perhaps and deceive the victim into either giving information or directly giving financial access.
So but let's say the communication was through SMS. So the responsible institution now, when the criminal is now accessing the financial account of the victim, is that entity which hosts the online financial account of the victim. That is now the responsible institution.
Yes, the holds that.
It's not the telco.
Yes. Yeah, okay. No, it's not the telco.
But cannot the responsible institution say, there was nothing wrong with my system?
Well, that's for the BSP. They're going to have their own. That's why you have the fraud guide, the anti-fraud systems that will be defined by the BSP. So if they are found compliant to these anti-fraud systems as defined by the BSP, then they will not be liable. But if it's found that they are not compliant, that's the time when they will be liable to possibly give restitution to the victims.
So in that example that we're giving, Mr. President, na it's the communication, the contact between the criminal and the victim is not through a responsible institution. And then the responsible institution shows that they have a compliant FMS. Does that mean that our victim has no more redress or remedy, Mr. President?
If what?
No more remedy. Our victim,
yes.
In that particular case, he or she does not have any more remedy because the critical information shared by the victim or the access to which was made possible by the victim to in favor of the criminal was made through SMS, so-called smishing, and the telcos are not responsible institutions. And the criminal took advantage of that critical information and then financially damaged the victim through an online financial account maintained by the victim, and that is the responsible institution, and that responsible institution has a compliant FMS, and yet the victim was financially damaged still.
Yes.
In that scenario, does the victim have any other remedy, Mr. President?
Yes, because there's still, whoever committed the fraud is still liable for the fraud. So habulin mo yung gumawa ng krimen.
Okay. I mean, paano tayo natulungan ni AFASA, Mr. President?
Ma-identify yung owner ng account. Makahabol nila. Kasi sa ngayon, pag may gumawa ng krimen, hindi mo ma-access yung account, hindi mo malalaman yung identity ng account holder, hindi mo matitrace kung sino yung mastermind.
Okay, but we have the victim's financial account. So what account now is our sponsor referring to? Kasi the victim identifies his own account. Sabi niya, ito yung account ko na nabawasan ng balanse. So
malalaman mo kung saan na-transfer yung pera na nagaling sa account ng biktima. Pag nalaman mo yung pag nalaman mo na kung sino yung may-ari ng account, at least kaya mo nang habulin.
So okay, so there is involved another online transaction, Mr. President. So if the victim was victimized through a physical cash withdrawal from his or her account, tapos na. It ends APASA. APASA is no longer applicable.
No, because if you withdraw from the account, you can still trace where the
physical cash.
Physical cash.
Physical cash. Yung isang first scenario po natin,
like as in yung person,
I understand
ibibigay mo sa kanya yung cash.
I understand the first scenario that the victim's online account, since may access na si criminal, he found a way to transfer it to another online account. That destination account APASA will now make possible the investigation. But if the victim's account, let us say, was or what the criminal did to the victim's account was to physically withdraw cash. Kasi nga the criminal is in control of the account. That's the scenario. But if it's a cash withdrawal, it ends the usefulness of APASA. Tapos na, because there's no other online account we can trace.
Well, I mean, obviously the powers that they will use to catch them, they have the powers. They're given these powers to address. Now, if the crime was he got money from the ATM nakuha niya yung ATM number ng tao and na-withdraw niya yung pera, that's titignan nila yung CCTV.
But we use another law. That's old-fashioned detective work.
Yes, but I mean that doesn't preclude any other. It doesn't preclude other crimes. It just gives additional powers to investigate these specific financial crimes. But if there are nuances to the crime, such as whether it be ATM fraud or something, of course, existing laws cover that as well. So it doesn't. It's without prejudice to these other acts of fraud.
Okay, so at least we are pointing out the extent of the application and usefulness of the measure. Yung point that it's really about online, pati especially if the destination account of the fraud is online, then that is where the bill wants to help. And how does it help? Again, Mr. President, this time who will now have the ability to find out all the details of the destination account.
The BSP.
Okay. Under present law,
the law enforcement agency can coordinate with the BSP, and they can find who is the holder of the account.
The BSP finds out and then reveals it to the law enforcement agency.
Yes.
Ganun po yun. Yes. Okay. Under present law, that cannot be done?
Yes, cannot be done. Bank secrecy law.
Even if it's not a bank, cannot be done?
Even if it's not a bank.
GCash is not a bank. So, cannot be done? The BSP cannot?
I think it falls under the Data Privacy Act.
So Data Privacy Act naman.
I'm not sure the
so
extent,
what are the laws which pose us obstacles to solving the crime that the types of crime that we are discussing?
Anti-money laundering, right?
Is that an obstacle? Anti-money laundering law?
No. Obstacle.
Obstacle.
Sorry, Bank Secrecy Act.
Bank Secrecy Act,
Data Privacy Act.
So these two main laws, ito pa.
Yeah, mostly, and then foreign. Okay. Yeah, the Foreign Currency Deposit Act and the revised Non-Stock Savings and Loan Association Act.
Sa Bank Secrecy Law, kasama na natin si foreign currency, same principle siguro yun, that cannot the BSP look right now under current law, look at the account name? They cannot look into the account balance.
No.
But can they not look into the account name?
No, they cannot.
Even the name?
They cannot. Any information is...
So... Well, kung ganyan nga naman ka-stricto po ang present state of our law, wala tayong masosolve na krimen na given the So that's the two laws. But yung isa po, yung non-stock, how does it pose as an obstacle?
Where the account is with a non-stock savings and loan.
Same spirit as the bank secrecy law. And then the other one is the data privacy. Okay, that's the data. So how do we intend to accomplish it, Mr. President, under the APASA bill? How do we intend to accomplish it, to empower the BSP to look into the account?
It expressly gives the BSP the power to look into these accounts. That's exactly what it does.
By amending the 4 laws that we mentioned? Are we amending the
It's an
4
exemption.
laws that we
It is
mentioned?
considered an exemption to the law.
So we are
In effect, I guess.
we are in our
In effect, yes. I mean, yes.
again.
It's an exemption to the law. So in a way, yes. However, it's
the
an
way
exemption.
the way we phrase it, Mr. President, is sinabi natin the 4 laws shall not apply in certain scenarios, Mr. President. So
Exemption, yes.
if it's meant to be a permanent non-application of the law, so would it be better to just amend the 4 laws, Mr. President, and then lagyan natin the scenarios under AFASA are not within the coverage of the law, Mr. President?
I think that would be more. This would be a simpler way to achieve what we want to achieve, which is the successful prosecution, and minimizing the occurrence of these kinds of financial scandals.
So this new power, so in effect, we're giving the BSP a new power. Kasi
Yes.
establish natin wala rito.
Yes.
What are the limits to the usage of this new power being granted to the BSP?
Well, 30 days. So obviously, to begin with, the complaint has to be by a responsible. It's defined here who can complain, and the account can only be suspended for a 30-day limit for 30 days.
So who's going to look into the account, Mr. President? I thought the BSP was only to issue the guidelines, Mr. President, but not really to look into the
They're issuing the guidelines for the fraud management system, but of course, yeah.
So we look into the
But if you look at the limitations, it's specific in the bill. Here, it shall be unlawful, however, for any official or employee of a responsible institution or the BSP to disclose any information concerning said financial accounts to any person under such conditions other than in relation to the examination and investigation under this section. It shall be unlawful for any person to use this act for persecution or harassment or as an instrument to hamper competition in trade and commerce.
Who are we giving this new power to, Mr. President? Is it to the responsible institution or to the BSP?
The BSP.
So the BSP is the institution which will, through of course a human being, through an official, which will have the power now to look into the details of a
Yes.
particular account.
Yes, they will be at that power.
And then what will the BSP do with the information?
Confirm if there was indeed a criminal act. They'll-
Share it with the police.
Yes, if necessary, if it's found that there is a high probability of a criminal act being perpetrated.
Will the BSP be the one also to file the criminal complaint against the
It may.
perpetrator before the prosecutor's office?
There's nothing that says they cannot.
So, what is the intention of our bill?
The victim can file.
The victim can file, and the victim will have now the information coming from the BSP.
Yes.
So
The
the BSP will
can
now
aid in the investigation. Right?
no, the BSP will now share the information with the complainant. Your
For the
money.
case, I think for the case, if there is a case that will be filed and it's found that there's, they can use the information for the case. Give it to law enforcement to pursue a case.
So what we are envisioning is that a victim, an individual who feels that he or she has been victimized will now call the attention of the BSP directly, Mr. President? Or saan siya magrereklamo, Mr. President, itong victim?
Law enforcement agencies.
Sa kanyang app, sa responsible institution muna siya magrereklamo?
She can complain to the responsible institution. They can file a case. I don't think this act doesn't preclude any of those possibilities.
I just want to be very clear, Mr. President. Kasi, okay, we are giving a new power to the BSP. Ang gusto ko lang maklaro is, when will the BSP now use this new power?
Well, I suppose, Mr. President, it's defined in the act, and if you have any ideas as to how to further harmonize or to sharpen the provisions, we'll be open to that.
So, Mr. President, we are giving the BSP the power to look into the details of specific individual financial accounts. We are also giving the BSP the power to issue guidelines for FMS, which the responsible institutions must comply with. Which now, the guidelines will now include the specific rules on how to temporarily hold a disputed account. Yun po ba yun? Yun lang po yung dalawa o tatlong powers po na bago na ibibigay natin sa BSP. I just want to be clear, Mr. President.
Yes, they're compelling them to come up with a fraud management system. So that's compelling, not the power to today. They're compelling them to have a fraud management system that will be dictated by them, and they will be giving them the additional powers to suspend.
And yes, it's the power of the BSP
to look into that,
to issue the guidelines, diba? To issue the guidelines.
But they can issue guidelines now. But this compels them to create.
So if they can issue guidelines now, they could.
But this compels them to create guidelines for.
So they don't. The BSP has no guidelines yet for these institutions under its jurisdiction. So we can remedy through.
Yeah, because they don't have the power yet to hold accounts. So the guidelines will include this new power that
no power to
hold the account for the financial institutions. So now they have to create guidelines based on the new powers granted to the FASA.
So no power to to temporarily hold disputed accounts, but is the power there already to require high standards for financial management systems of the institutions under their jurisdiction?
Yeah.
Pwede na.
Yeah.
Pwede na po.
Yeah.
At meron na ba?
I'm sure they have some, but I don't think it's perhaps given the increase in the number of financial scams. Perhaps it's not sufficient.
No, but do we have a BSP resource person? Do they already have at least guidelines man lamang on kahit na short of temporarily holding the disputed account?
No, they cannot hold a disputed account now.
Yes, yes.
They cannot.
Short of that.
Short of that. There's no. Well, I think they have. Yeah. For holding, they have no authority for that. But I mean, for basic, do they have basic? So as of now. Yeah, they have fraud management now, but it does not. It will not. It will not make liability to the responsible institution. It will not. It will not enforce a liability now. So under this law, they'll be able to enforce that liability.
Wala pong liability now.
To restitute.
Again,
For restitution. Right now, the existing does not have that.
Alam mo, Mr. President, nabasa ko rin ito. Ayaw ko nga kung totoo yung mga, di ba, yung meron, di ba, sa telco, meron dati issue yung diminishing load. Meron yata rin diminishing balance sa mga payment apps, reklamo eh. So, has this ever reached the BSP, Mr. President? Diminishing balance.
I've heard of that, Mr. President.
Does the BSP confirm it na meron ganyang reklamo?
They confirm that there are those complaints.
Is the BSP currently helpless to help the victims right now, Mr. President, under current state of the law?
I'm not sure if the existing powers make it difficult for them to strongly enforce that kind of occurrence. So with the existing powers, it's not sufficient. Maybe not completely helpless, but definitely for them, it's insufficient.
Meron na po bang natulungan ang BSP na isang individual na ang reklamo ay the diminishing balance complaint?
With regards to diminishing, as far as they can, there's none really that they've regarding the diminishing balance.
Okay. So, Mr. President, we have established that the phenomenon actually exists na meron talagang sa payment apps sa diminishing balance, except that we we cannot yet call it a scam kasi malay mo nalimutan lang talaga na ginastos pala.
Not clear, it's not clear.
And then according to the BSP, there's no specific case that has been, ilagay ko na lang sa quotation marks, solved or assisted, Mr. President.
In most cases, it's the provider themselves who talk to the client. Yeah. But in terms of the enforcement of the BSP,
okay, but kung nasosolve naman ito to the satisfaction of the client, so
well, that's not the only scam that occurs in diminishing, and I'm not even sure if that's a scam. That could be,
yes,
that could just be a technical glitch.
Forgotten transaction.
Yes.
Sir President, so yes, yes, that's not the only. That's not. I agree, Mr. President. That's not the only scam. So our bill anticipates, ganun ba? Anticipates the different possible online scams.
Based on what we've seen happen, yes. We do our best in what is a very fast-paced environment. This bill tries its best to identify and give the necessary powers to address this issue.
Sige po, Mr. President. So, at least, Mr. President, we are clear that there are certain new powers that we are granting the BSP. Any other government agency that we are granting new powers to, new authority to, Mr. President, under bill?
No.
So hanggang dito lang tayo mga tol. Maraming salamat sa panonood at patuloy na suporta. God bless you sa inyo lahat at hanggang sa muli. Paalam.